A young man was celebrating the end of the school year, full of plans and a bright future ahead. But one night, a simple drive home turned into a nightmare. He called for help, confident that he could make it back safely. But then, after 47 tense minutes on the phone, his last words cut through the darkness.
"Oh shit."
And just like that, he was gone. No struggle, no evidence, no explanation, just silence. Then, he vanished without a trace. Let's dive into the story of Brandon Swanson. Born January 30th, 1989, in Marshall, Minnesota, Brandon grew up in a loving home with supportive parents who valued education and curiosity. Known for his kindness and intelligence, he pursued wind turbine technology, passionate about renewable energy and a better future. On May 14, 2008, after celebrating with friends, Brandon drove home but veered into a ditch. Believing he was near Lind, he called his parents. During a calm 47-minute call, he described walking toward distant lights as they searched for him. As Brandon Swanson walked alone in the darkness, he remained on the phone with his father, trying to explain his surroundings in hopes they could find him. He described gravel roads crunching beneath his feet, the occasional fence line running parallel to the road, and vast open fields that stretched endlessly under the night sky. There were no streetlights, no houses in sight, just the quiet, eerie emptiness of rural Minnesota. Then, suddenly, Brandon's voice changed. With urgency in his tone, he exclaimed, "Oh shit." And just like that, the line went dead. It was abrupt, without any further sound, no struggle, no follow-up noise, just silence. That was the last anyone ever heard from Brandon Swanson. Panicked, his parents tried calling him back repeatedly. The calls would ring, but there was no answer. Fearing the worst, they drove around all night searching in the direction Brandon said he was headed, calling his name into the darkness, hoping to spot his car or find some sign of where he might have gone. But they found nothing. By morning, when Brandon still hadn't returned or made contact, they called the police and reported him missing. At first, law enforcement didn't treat the case with urgency. They assumed that Brandon, who had been drinking earlier that night, had likely wandered off to a friend's house or decided to sleep somewhere until he sobered up. Maybe he was embarrassed or simply needed time. But his parents knew better. Something felt deeply wrong. Eventually, the police began their search. They quickly located Brandon's vehicle, a Chevy Lumina, but it wasn't anywhere near the town of Lind, where Brandon had believed he was. In fact, it was nearly 25 miles away, in a remote area near the small town of Taunton, northwest of Marshall. The car was found in a ditch along a gravel road, undamaged, and with no obvious signs of foul play. There was no damage to the vehicle, no signs of foul play, and nothing inside or around the car that would indicate a struggle. It looked as though the car had simply veered off the road and become immobile in the soft ground. But what truly baffled investigators was the location. It was nowhere near the town of Lind, where Brandon had told his parents he believed he was. This raised a troubling question. Had Brandon been disoriented, or was something more sinister at play? The discovery of the car only deepened the mystery, and as time passed with no sign of Brandon, theories began to emerge, each offering a possible explanation, but none with definitive answers. One of the most widely accepted and frequently discussed theories is that Brandon may have accidentally drowned. When his phone last pinged, it was in a location not far from the Yellow Medicine River, a shallow but treacherous waterway, surrounded by uneven terrain, thick vegetation, and steep embankments. It's believed Brandon may have tried to cross the river in the dark and fallen in. Given the conditions that night, pitch-black rural environment with little to no visibility, this theory holds some weight. Brandon might have misjudged the terrain, slipped, or gotten caught in the current. However, despite extensive search efforts, including the use of search dogs, dive teams, and thermal imaging, no body, clothing, or personal belongings have ever been found. That absence casts significant doubt on the drowning theory. In most drowning cases, some evidence eventually surfaces, but in Brandon's case, there has been nothing. Another credible theory is that Brandon may have succumbed to hypothermia. The night he disappeared, temperatures hovered around 39 degrees Fahrenheit, 4 degrees Celsius. chilly enough to pose a serious threat, especially to someone who was potentially intoxicated, lightly dressed, and walking through wet grass and marshy terrain for hours. Hypothermia can set in quickly under such conditions, especially if someone is wet or physically exhausted. In cases of hypothermia, victims often become disoriented and confuse a phenomenon known as paradoxical undressing, where individuals remove their clothing despite the cold due to the body's confused signals. Some have speculated that Brandon, lost and shivering, may have collapsed somewhere in a field or wooded area and simply never been found, his body hidden by tall grass, brush, or water. Despite multiple searches over the years, some using cadaver dogs and highly trained teams, no physical trace of Brandon has ever been recovered. That persistent lack of evidence continues to frustrate investigators and haunt his family. If Brandon Swanson became disoriented or injured in the dark rural terrain, it's very possible that he was unable to seek shelter or assistance. The area he vanished in is made up of vast open fields, dense patches of vegetation, and deep ditches, making it difficult to navigate even in daylight, let alone at night, with minimal visibility. If he had fallen, sprained an ankle, or become otherwise incapacitated, he may have simply collapsed in an isolated area that search teams either didn't reach or overlooked. This scenario could help explain why, after all these years, his body has never been recovered. It's entirely plausible that he wandered far outside the initial search radius and succumbed to exposure alone in the dark. Though there's no physical evidence pointing to foul play, some theorists continue to entertain the possibility that Brandon may have crossed paths with someone harboring malicious intent. Perhaps he flagged down a passing car, hoping for help, and unknowingly stepped into a dangerous situation. Maybe someone else was out on those rural roads that night, someone who didn't have good intentions. However, this theory remains one of the least supported due to the lack of any struggle, signs of violence, or witnesses. The car was intact, and there were no signs that Brandon was forcibly taken or harmed at the scene. One of the strangest and most confounding aspects of the case is Brandon's mistaken belief that he was near Lind, when, in reality, he was almost 25 miles away near Taunton. This misperception has led to theories that he was disoriented, possibly due to alcohol or sheer darkness. Some experts have suggested that the flatness of the prairie landscape at night can play tricks on perception. Lights from distant farmhouses or towns might appear closer or farther than they really are, and without landmarks, it's easy to get turned around. Brandon may have sincerely believed he was near Lind because of what he thought he saw, the significance of the "oh shit" moment. Perhaps the most haunting piece of this entire case is the final moment of Brandon's phone call with his father. After calmly describing his surroundings and expressing his frustration, Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit," and the line went dead. That moment has become a chilling focal point for theorists and investigators alike. Did he trip over something? Did he fall into the river or a hidden ravine? Did an animal cross his path and startle him? Or did something, or someone, suddenly emerge from the darkness? What makes this moment so tragic is the helplessness that followed. His father kept the line open, calling his son's name into the phone, but there was no reply, just silence. Brandon Swanson's disappearance didn't just devastate his family, it sparked real legislative change. Frustrated by law enforcement's initial dismissal, treating his vanishing as a typical case of a young adult blowing off steam, Brandon's parents became determined advocates for reform. Their efforts led to the passage of Brandon's Law in 2009. The law mandates that Minnesota authorities respond immediately when an adult goes missing under suspicious circumstances, regardless of age or perceived intentions. It also strengthens communication between agencies, especially in rural areas where jurisdictional boundaries can slow searches. Yet, despite their activism, Brandon's parents still lack the one thing they long for most: closure. They continue to raise awareness, maintain a memorial website, and hope for answers. The area around Taunton, where Brandon vanished, is notoriously difficult to search. Thick grasses, marshy fields, water-filled ditches, and wooded patches can easily conceal someone lying just feet away. Extensive search efforts may have simply overlooked where he collapsed or wandered. Beyond his abandoned car and cell phone pings, no physical evidence has ever been found, No wallet, shoes, clothing, or even a dropped phone. Investigators have been left with nothing to follow. Brandon Swanson's disappearance remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases in American history. Despite speaking to his father moments before vanishing, he left no trace, and his story continues to capture attention in documentaries and online forums, a chilling reminder of how someone can vanish completely and leave loved ones with endless questions.